but he has served us, Brother Bill. He served us when he came and he went to the cross. And he is still serving us because we have an advocate, Jesus Christ the righteous. And yes, he serves us, and that is our walking, living, breathing, forever illustration of how we should deal with each other. It's not power over, it's serving. And so we took a look at Christ's example in Philippians. We took a look in that picture in Mark. And then we went to 1 Peter chapter 5. And I'm just going to read this. I don't really want to talk about it because we need to get going. But I love this passage. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 1. The elders which are among you I exhort. So Peter's talking to the leaders. This isn't the young needing milk, Brother Bill. This is the Brother Bills. Okay? This is the leaders. This is the strong. This is the counselors. The elders which are among you I exhort, who am also an elder and a witness of the suffering of Christ, and also a partaker of the glory that shall be revealed. Just let me tell you, when we're talking about leaders, I'm in there. And I'll give you a little nudge. I'm really in there. So pay attention to what I'm about to tell you. This is what I'm about to tell you. Feed the flock of God which is among you, taking the oversight thereof, not by constraint, I have to do this, but willingly, not for filthy lucre, but of a ready mind. Now here it is, verse 3. Neither as being lords over God's heritage. That's not how we're supposed to do it. That's not who we're supposed to be. You know, when I go to work at Dex Imaging, my boss says, I'm the boss. We are not supposed to be the I'm the boss people. It's not supposed to be how we example ourselves. Neither being as lords over God's heritage, but being ensamples to the flock. That's how people will follow those who they think have their best interests. Bruce, you want to get that class to follow you, let them kids think that you are going to help them get a good life. You will now be the most important person in their life because, unfortunately, many parents aren't that person. Those kids do not believe that parent has their best interest. They believe that parent had a slave. And if you can become that person, they will follow you and call you when you're 40 and 50 and 52. So be careful what you're signing up for. Verse 4, and when the chief shepherd shall appear, ye shall receive a crown of glory that fadeth not away. Likewise, ye younger, submit yourself unto the elder. Verse 6, yea, all of you be subject one to another, and be clothed with humility. For God resisteth the proud, and giveth grace to the humble. Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time. So we spent some time looking at humility. Then we jumped from that, and we got a warning last week about pride. And we talked about performance pride, and we talked about appearance pride, and we talked about financial pride, and verbal pride, and class pride, and power pride. One of the things we didn't talk about spiritual pride, which would take us right to Matthew chapter 23, where it says, you say, and you do not. And it would have a whole bunch of woe unto you, woe unto you, woe unto you. JR, to bring it up to speed, like this would be the people who go to the right church, who wear the right clothes, who say the right things, but their life is full of bitterness and anger and wrath and malice and clamor and evil speaking and power over and control. But they get their value from religious pride. And so we didn't get a chance to go there, but we've been there many times. And then also last week, we had a couple tools, 3 tools to help us battle pride. Brother Bill, I'm trying to get through this page as quick as I can. It's Bruce's fault. She wants the outline. Tools that help us battle pride, and that would be self-awareness. Answer this question. Brother Maddox, well, to yourself, answer this question honestly. Because it solves a lot of problems in life if we have the right answer to this question. What do you really think you deserve? Because usually when we get offended, it's because we're not getting what we deserve. When we fight with a brother, it's because we think we should have been treated differently. If we honestly get to the place where we're sinners who deserve hell, and everything we get is grace and mercy, what do we have to be offended over? Humility gets aided when we begin to examine ourselves and see ourselves for who we really are. 2, Christ awareness. When we begin to see and look at him and how he responded and how he acted It'll humble us. And third was God awareness. When I consider the handiworks, what is man that thou art mindful of him? Now, all of this, after we've begun to grow in humility, now we get to look at the next one. And the next one, with all lowliness and meekness. The next one would be meekness. And again, this kind of makes sense because, let's do it this way. If you go to the Beatitudes, Doug, if you go to the Beatitudes, blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are those who are mourning. Okay, those are the humble. Poor in spirit and broken and have nothing. And what are you poor in spirit and broken over? Well, that's what you're mourning over is your sinful state. So first you're humble. And remember when the preacher taught on this, he taught on it, and it was kind of like, it was kind of the rings in the park. You can't get from one ring to the other. You can't skip and go to ring number 8. You have to start at ring number 1. And from ring number 1, you can go to ring number 2 and then to ring number 3. Well, in this case, ring number 1, and it actually happens to be the same case in the Beatitudes. I wonder why that is. Oh, there I am sarcastic again. But it begins with humility. And it's going to go from humility and go right to meekness. So here you go, Brother Hank. Meekness. Meekness is important. Meekness is the second ring. So what is it to be meek? Well, you remember when we started on humility? And I went, humility. Oh, boy. How do we describe humility? Here we go. Ready? What is it to be meek? Meekness. Oh, boy. How do we describe meekness? Because I get kind of the same picture when we look at both of them. But Doug, when I talk about humility, now I know it's important. I know. Give me the test. I'll get it right. But there's something inside of me that makes meekness and humility, they both seem kind of weak. They seem downgrading. They seem passive. They make me seem or feel helpless. I mean, I'll go so far as to quietly inside of me but not say out loud, so don't listen here, that person is kind of the loser. I mean, JR, the meek person is always giving in. If you're always giving in, can you ever win? We're supposed to be overcomers. So, what is meekness? See, I know he's going to be right here, and he's going to ask me these questions, so he's going to want to know, what is meekness? So I looked it up in the dictionary right there for you. I said, I'll look it up in the dictionary. I can't describe it. I'll look it up in the dictionary. This is what the dictionary said. To be meek is to be deficient in courage or deficient in spirit. Whoa. Brother Hamilton, Christ said he was meek. He said he's meek and lowly. He said he's meek and humble. Christ is not deficient in anything. So I know that definition, that's out the window. It's a bad definition. I need to understand what meekness is. So I do a little bit of a word study. The Greek word is prautes. It means mild. It means gentle. It's the opposite of vengeful or seeking retaliation. It's a person who harbors no bitterness or no resentment. It's a person who doesn't react against others. I'm not saying he doesn't react to, but he doesn't react against. It's a person with a quiet willingness to be submissive. No real self-assertion. JR sounds like a nice person, right? I'd want to be around that person. But it doesn't sound strong. I don't know that I want, quiet, submissive, without rebellion, no self-assertion, no retaliation. I don't know that I want that person to be a leader. It just doesn't sound strong. So a little further study. You go into and find out how it was used at the time, and it would be used. This is why I'm throwing all these out, because you've probably heard every one of these used as an illustration for meekness. And I don't want to miss one. So it's been used as a calming medicine. So let's say a meek person, they're like a tranquilizer. They learn how to defuse the situation. They can just calm it down. Or it's been talked about like a gentle breeze. It's soothing. Let me tell you right now, I'm sweating profusely. A calming breeze would be nice. And it just calms things down. So it's a tender person, a pleasant person, a gentle person, a person who's not hard, a person who's not rough, a person who's not violent. And again, I want this person to be my friend. But my real world is not walking through the flowers going, ooh. Sometimes, oh, I could have done that. Ooh. I tried that night. I couldn't pull it off. Man, I'm going to be truthful. Sometimes my world feels like a war. It's a battle. And my mind just says weak is going to get nothing done. So I begin to struggle. Something's wrong. Brother Bill, something's wrong right here. Because Jesus was meek. So this picture, this struggle I'm creating of meekness, it can't be right. Eric, you have any of those verses ready for me? All right, 2 Corinthians. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, Paul would say, Christ was meek. Now, I, Paul, myself beseech you by the meekness and gentleness of Christ. So that's all I want you. I'll get across. So when I start to have this struggle with meekness, I start to have this struggle with humility, it's a real struggle. Because if I'm not careful, what I'm doing, I'm creating the picture of who Christ is. When we get to 1 John, Bruch, and it says, my little children, cast out idols, don't love idols, don't take on idols. That problem really is that we create false pictures of Christ. That's the idols we create. We're the good religious people in church. The idols we create what he looks like. And JR, since he is meek, if I let my definition of meek go on him, I'm just messing this whole thing up. So it's very important to me. Meekness is very important. Not only is it the second ring, not only the only way I can walk the worthy walk is to walk in meekness, but when I talk about meekness, I'm talking about my Savior and who he is and what he was like and his character. So, but Bill, I have to get this right. So we need to look at it a little bit more. How about James? I'm going to cut some of these out. James chapter 3. James chapter 3. All right, Ben. So who is a wise man? Well, it's the PhD. It's the one who went to a law school. It's the one who drives the nicest car, has the most money. Let's see. Who is a wise man and endued with knowledge among you? Let him show out of a good conversation his works with meekness of wisdom. Oh, wow. You know who is a wise man? A wise man is one whose actions show himself to be meek. There you go. Doug, you're looking for a good influencer? It's going to be the meek one. That's wisdom. But if ye have bitter envying and strife in your hearts, glory not and lie not against the truth. Keep going. This wisdom descendeth not from above, but is earthly, sensual, and devilish. This whole power over, this whole manipulative, the whole, I'll make it happen. That's not godly. That's not heavenly. That's straight from our evil flesh. For where envying and strife is, there is confusion and every evil work. Here we go. But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, same word actually used up there as meekness, and easy to be entreated, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. So here I go. Got this picture. So I got meekness. This is the person who's gonna just calm things down, who's gonna let things go, who's gonna not have the fight. Oh, Brother Bill, there I go again. Who's gonna not have the backbone. It gets a little awkward, but don't miss the end of that. This meek person is without partiality and without hypocrisy. So there's some things he'll take a stand on. There are some things he's not going to just go along and get along. Okay? All right. Eric, Timothy. But thou, O man of God, flee these things and follow after. Okay. JR, thou, O man of God. So we know who he's talking to, right? Bruch, I would go so far as to say what he's talking about here is a person who's in that worthy walk, okay? And look, but thou, O man of God, flee these things and follow after righteousness, godliness, faith, love, patience, and meekness. This is something to be pursued. This is something you have to have. Keep going. Oh, Bill, look at that. You know how verse 11 ended? Eric, go back to verse 11. Can you do that for me? Bill was asleep. I want to make sure he gets this last word. See that last word, Bill? You know what that last word is? That's meekness. We're supposed to be meek. That's this quiet, get along, cause no problem, walk through the daisies, kumbaya, my Lord person. Right? Well, it is all of those things. It is the gentle person. But it is also this person in verse 12. Fight the good fight of faith. Doug, here we go. This is the get out of jail free card. Because I was starting to feel all caged up. There are some things that the meek person will fight for. There are some times meekness is not weakness. There are some times meekness will stand. Meekness is gentle. But for the right cause, meekness is going to fight. Now it's starting to fit a little bit with the picture of Christ that I know, because he stood for some things. He called out some things. Matthew Henry wrote a book. Now, most people know Matthew Henry from his commentary series. But Matthew Henry wrote a book called The Quest for Meekness and Quietness of Spirit. In that book, he used this picture over and over again, talking about being used to the hand. He used this picture to illustrate meekness, Matthew. And what he's talking about is the picture of a wild horse. It just sounds better, you know. When I'm joking around, I can say Matt and be all, you know, you can be Matthew. He used this picture of being used to the hand. That picture is talking about the taming of a horse. You know, it is the wild horse. That wild horse is kicking and bucking and will not take the bridle. That wild horse lives entirely to chase its own passions. Right? Really has no purpose and accomplishes not a whole lot. It eats and does what you have to do after you're done eating, and then sooner or later it dies. That's the life of that horse. Now I'm going to give you, Justin, that has a totally different meaning when we realize, you know, in Isaiah and Jeremiah, what God called his own people? Wild donkeys, you know, untrained camels out there running around. That's who people of the flesh are. We're wild, untrained, untamed, no meekness. And so he gets this picture. But the minute you become used to your hand, used to the hand, the minute that horse becomes used to the hand, that accepts the bridle, that horse now has some dignity, some poise, some usefulness, same power, but now that power is under control. Let me give you an illustration this way. Preacher, if there's a lion in my backyard, I'm going to stay inside the house. Because lions are big and they are scary. And that lion can pounce and do whatever it wants to do, and there's nothing I can do about it. So if I have a mighty, powerful lion in the backyard, I'm staying in the house. Because that lion can pounce anywhere. But JR, if the master, if the trainer of that lion shows up, cracks that whip a couple times, that lion's behavior changes. Now, be truthful, I'd still stay in the house. But when the master is there and he submits to the master, it's the same power, Justin. But now he doesn't pounce on whatever he wants to. Now his actions are based off what the master asked him to do. One of the other words used for meekness is talking about submission, under mission, changing now, no longer reacting to what we want to do and our own passions, but now under the master's control. This is the picture that's used. Eric, give me Proverbs 25. This is what's talked about when we talk about here. He that hath no rule over his own spirit is like a city that is broken down and without walls. Then what it's talking about is, okay, when we're without control, then any temptation that comes our way, we're going to fall prey to it. There's no walls to protect us. Preacher, no self-control, anything can come in there. I will be like that lion, and I will take anything, and I will just pounce on everything, and I'll destroy everything around me. No protection, no walls. All power, all destruction, all bucking, all kicking, no submission, no use to the hands. A person like this without self-control is dangerous. I've listened to, I don't know, I'm 50 years old. I'm 53, I think. Preacher, I've listened to lots of sermons on meekness and humility. They're always together. I've heard lots of illustrations. I've had lots of times where it was made important to me. But really, I want to take it the other way. I want you to see what happens with the absence of meekness. We all know it's important. Bill, I said meekness this morning. You went, boom. You could probably come up with all the illustrations I was going to use, every single one of them. And it was like, okay, we'll go through this. Let me be good and give them attention. But what I really want to do is look at what happens. Because the person without self-control is destructive. Really, the best place for us to go is if we went into those Sunday school classes and said, okay, when we talk about meekness to the young kid, is this your dad? Or we go into that class and we talk to the women, is this your husband? Or maybe we could talk to some of the men and say, is this your wife? Because then we would really get to see what it's like to live without meekness. My dad was a good man. But preacher, one thing you would never say about my dad is he was ever under control. He was a good soldier. He was responsible. But Bill, as a kid, I did not know whether I was going to come home and get punched in the face or get a hug. And that is a terrible way to grow up. My dad would fly off the handle for the littlest things. You have a column, we could call this column anger. And I'd watch it, and he would go cussing, he would go berating. Preacher, I've seen him storm out of stores and storm out of restaurants. By the way, all the time calling himself a Christian. Christians shouldn't be storming out of stores. They shouldn't be storming. Well, here we go. I actually forgot about this, but I've seen him storm out of a church door. We shouldn't be storming. It would go to violence. I'm not going to talk about those things. His favorite thing, though, with us kids was, because let me tell you, Brother Hamilton, he couldn't get away with this with my mom. You know, he could only go so far. Because it would always end up in the fight, and then the fight would always cause, this is real life. Is this too real for some people? Because this is what no meekness looks like. So Justin, this is what you have to do. Let's go for a ride, son. There was lots of violent rides. And then there would be pouting. Miss Pat, I might hate this the most. You know, the big fits. You know, I've talked before about how one time he threw a fit on a vacation and decided to walk home back to Germany from France. He came all the way down here to go to Everett's funeral, my father-in-law's funeral. Got offended at my father-in-law's funeral. Lives in Tennessee. Started walking home from Tennessee, from Florida to Tennessee. My mom had to leave to go chase him. No, that's not the worst. Justin, that's not the worst. Here's the worst. The worst, what aggravated me the most, was when in the middle of all of this, you know who had to take all of that behavior? Any person who chose to stay around him. Okay? The worst was when he would break off with the whole, oh, boo, nobody cares about me. Nobody talks to me. Guess why, McFly? Because anytime anybody says anything that you take the wrong way, it's anger or violence or fit or boo-hoo. Let's just avoid it. that kind of person is dangerous. Any person who thinks they're strong because they can yell and get things done is destructive. That is not how we are supposed to get things done. In my experience, because I've grown up in and around the church, I know a lot of these people who are in churches, who carry the right Bible, who say the right word, and go to the right church. Now, I'm going to do this too. I can't tell you how many times I was in a church. Preacher, I can't tell you how many times I've been in church. My dad was in the military. We moved. It's lots of churches. And I sat back there saying, doesn't anyone see my dad? My dad is furious right now. The meekness is not there. As soon as he can get, here's his whole control. We got to get out of these walls. We probably won't even leave the parking lot before the blow-up's going to happen. Jerry, you know how many times I sat and prayed, Lord, please, please let someone come and talk to him. Let someone, kind of Galatians 6, in the spirit of meekness, considering thyself. Let someone approach him. Justin, I'm telling you, all of us kids and my mom afraid to go home. Not one time. Never did it happen. As I got older, I got bitter. I did. Don't expect me to follow you, youth leader. Christ stood up for the weak. You won't say a word. I became accusing. Meekness and humility, they weren't inside of me. Then I had somebody, it was actually my uncle, didn't like my father. Brother Maddox, one of my favorite verses is Galatians 6:1. Brethren, if a man be overtaken in a fault, you which are spiritual, restore such a one in the spirit of meekness. This is probably why. Eric, you never knew this. This is probably why. Preacher, I got bitter. I got angry. 16, 17, I'm counting down the days so I could leave. I can't even tell you what the house looked like, what bedroom I slept in. I was there so little. Got angry at him one time, was complaining about him, because that's what you do. And my uncle, who was unsaved, said, let me tell you something about your dad. Your dad grew up with an alcoholic father. Your dad moved out when he was 17. He went in the Navy, because you could go in the Navy at 17, Army not till 18. As soon as he could, he got out of the Navy, and he went into the Army so he could go serve in Vietnam. He started to tell me some things, Brother Bill, and all of my anger and attack. When you start to examine self, and you start to examine Christ, and you start to look at what the Bible says, now I have to have a different view on him. So this is not, if you're sitting right there saying he's a terrible guy, this is what he is. He's a guy who lived by the flesh, who never started his engine up and didn't walk in the worthy walk. My point is, there's a lot of people just like that. And what they need is for us to ensample the worthy walk and to live with some humility and some meekness. And when we see overtaken in a fault to confront, now Justin, I understand why they didn't, because you know what happens if you confront that? All right, that man is motivated totally by pride. You think he's going to humble that pride? No, it's going to be a fight. You're going to have to push this. You're going to have to take it to a point. And it's so much easier just to say, well, that's not my responsibility, or here really is. He's always been that way. I know he's always been that way. He's out of control. All the things we want to pounce on. And we'll pounce on all kinds of things. We'll pounce on belts and shoes and hair. We'll pounce on all kinds of stuff. What about humility? What about meekness? What about long-suffering? Oh, no. Well, he's just got some pride. I know. The absence of meekness is destructive. Throw that whole page away. All of this stuff starts, and Doug, here's where you got to go back to the first one. What was the first ring? The first ring is lowliness, humility. You can't do them opposite. You don't have pride and meekness. Let's see, they don't go together. It's humility, and then it'll go to meekness. Humility is the key. It's why it's first It changes us. It changes what we care about. What do we care about? Okay, well, without that humility, we care that somebody sang my song. Okay, I've been in church a long time. You know how many people I got upset because I've seen somebody else sing their song. Preacher, this is where I can take advantage. I've been in a lot of churches. It doesn't have to be this one, but it probably is. We get upset over silly things. Somebody sang my song. Somebody cut me off going into the parking lot. Do you know how they spoke to me? They disrespected me. They didn't speak to me. They disrespected me. These are the things we get upset. He hit my car. He broke my window. I've seen that happen before. Actually, my car's been hit twice. We're like a city without walls. We get upset over all the little wrong things. And we're open prey. And I guess the question is why isn't it things like hypocrisy and bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and evil speaking? Why isn't it self-righteousness and pride and empty teaching? Why aren't those the things that wake us up, make us ready to pounce? I think really if we're going to talk about meekness, we have to start with what really gets us upset. Where are we on that humility growth scale? What bothers us? Because until we're the lion who roars about the right things, we're never walking the worthy walk. And if we're not careful, none of those things are going to be the right things. We're done. We're out of time. There's some great illustrations. I love David. David gives us some great illustrations of meek. And they're even better because we can contrast them to Saul. We talked not too long ago about David in the cave. David in the cave, not wanting to touch Saul. Well, what do you think happens if that's flipped around? And Saul, and it's David. David's dead right there. Saul's going to kill him as quick as can be. Saul is a man who almost killed his own son to protect his own pride. David is the guy who, being chased out of the city and having Shimei kick dust and throw rocks at him and mock him, and having Abishai say, one word, I'll cut off his head. David, just let him alone. Bill, it does start with, what are we getting upset? What are we roaring at? It's a telltale of our humility, which leads into our meekness. Now, next week, I'm going to take a look at 10 scriptural things that help us grow in meekness. And we'll keep moving on. We close in a word of prayer this morning.